The Signal and the Noise, by Nate Silver. Introduction. Picture this. It's October 2008. The world's financial system is in absolute freefall. The stock market has plummeted nearly 30% in just 5 weeks. Giant companies, names you thought were unshakable, like Lehman Brothers, have simply vanished. The engine of the global economy has seized up, and nobody seems to know why. The smartest people in the world? The experts on TV, the heads of giant banks, the government regulators, were called before Congress to explain themselves. And their answer, almost universally, was a collective shrug. Virtually no one anticipated what is coming, said the head of Standard & Poor's, one of the agencies whose job it was to predict exactly this kind of disaster. Nobody saw it coming. Have you ever felt that way? Like the world is moving so fast, with so much information flying at you every second, that it's impossible to know what to believe? One day, experts tell you one thing is true. The next day, the opposite. We have more data at our fingertips than any generation in history. We carry supercomputers in our pockets. And yet, from financial crises to political elections to even global pandemics, we seem to be caught by surprise again and again. This is the central mystery that the brilliant statistician and forecaster Nate Silver tackles in his groundbreaking book, The Signal and the Noise. This book isn't just about numbers, it's about a fundamental human struggle, the quest for truth in a world filled with distractions. It sold hundreds of thousands of copies and cemented Silver's reputation as one of the most important thinkers of our time, a man who famously predicted the winner of 49 out of 50 states in the 2008 U.S. presidential election. He did this not because he has a crystal ball, but because he has mastered a timeless skill, the ability to separate what's real from what just feels real. To find the meaningful information, what he calls the signal, buried under an avalanche of irrelevant, misleading, and confusing data, which he calls the noise. Today, we're going to journey through his most powerful ideas. And I promise you, by the end of our time together, you won't just understand why so many predictions fail. You'll have a new way of looking at the world, a mental toolkit for making better decisions, thinking more clearly, and becoming just a little bit wiser in your own life. This is about learning how to be less wrong, and in a world of constant uncertainty, that might be the most valuable skill you can ever possess. Book summary. So where does it all begin? Well, Nate Silver takes us back in time, long before computers and the internet, to an invention that first triggered this explosion of information, the printing press. Before Johannes Gutenberg's invention in 1440, a single book could cost the modern equivalent of $20,000. Knowledge was a luxury item, decaying almost as fast as it could be copied by hand. For most of human history, progress was agonizingly slow. Then, almost overnight, everything changed. The cost of a book dropped 300-fold. Information was suddenly available to the masses. This sparked revolutions in science, in commerce, and in thought. It was the beginning of the modern world. But it also created a new problem. For the first time, people were drowning in information. And when you have too much information, what do? You start picking and choosing. You listen to the parts you like and ignore the parts you don't. You find allies who made the same choices and enemies of everyone else. The printing press didn't just give us science, it first gave us hundreds of years of brutal religious wars, as people clung to their newfound proofs with more conviction and less tolerance than ever before. This, Silver argues, is the fundamental challenge we still face today. We think we want more information, but what we really want is more knowledge. The information is just the raw material. Knowledge is the finished product. The signal is the truth. The noise is what distracts us from it. And in our modern world, the noise is increasing much, much faster than the signal. Let's go back to that 2008 financial crisis. It was, at its heart, a catastrophic failure of prediction. The credit rating agencies, companies like Moody's and Standard & Poor's, were supposed to be the referees. Their job was to evaluate the risk of complex financial products, these things called mortgage-backed securities. They gave their highest rating, AAA, to thousands of these investments, essentially telling the world they were as safe as money in the bank. How safe? Standard & Poor's predicted that the chance of one of these triple_rated securities failing was just 0.12%. That's about 1 in 850. What actually happened? Nearly 28% of them failed. Their prediction wasn't just wrong, it was off by a factor of more than 200. It was like a weather forecast predicting a sunny, 86-degree day, and instead, a blizzard hits. How could they get it so spectacularly wrong? Silver points to a powerful flaw in their thinking, a mistake we all make. They mistook precision for accuracy. Their models were incredibly complex, with calculations down to the decimal point. They looked scientific. They looked precise. But they were built on a dangerously flawed assumption that if a carpenter in Cleveland defaulted on his mortgage, it had no bearing on whether a dentist in Denver would. They assumed all these thousands of mortgages were independent events. But they weren't. They were all tied together by a single giant factor that the experts chose to ignore: a massive, nationwide housing bubble. When that bubble burst, it didn't just take down one mortgage, it took them all down together. The models looked precise, but they were nowhere near the target. As Silver puts it, this is like claiming you're a good shot because all your bullets land in the same place, even if that place is nowhere near the bullseye. This leads us to one of the book's most powerful ideas, a distinction drawn from the great philosopher Isaiah Berlin. Silver argues that forecasters fall into two categories: hedgehogs and foxes. A hedgehog knows one big thing. They have a grand theory, a universal principle that they believe explains everything. Think of a political pundit who sees every event through the lens of their ideology, or a stock market guru who has one magic formula. Hedgehogs are decisive, confident, and they make for great television. They speak in bold certainties. But, as a long-term study by researcher Philip Tetlock found, their predictions are barely better than random chance. When Tetlock studied so-called political experts, he found that the more famous they were, the more media interviews they did, the worse their predictions tended to be. Why? Because hedgehogs fall in love with their own theories. When new evidence comes along that contradicts their big idea, they don't change their mind. They twist the evidence to fit the theory. They are terrible at dealing with uncertainty. A fox, on the other hand, knows many little things. Foxes are scrappy. They don't believe in one grand theory. Instead, they take a little bit of information from here, a little from there. They are multidisciplinary, adaptable, and self-critical. They're not afraid to say I don't know. They are more comfortable with nuance, complexity, and uncertainty. And it turns out, foxes are far, far better forecasters. The experts who failed to see the financial crisis were hedgehogs. They had their one big idea, that housing prices never go down on a national level, and they clung to it, ignoring all the signals that suggested this time was different. So how do we learn to think like a fox? This is where Silver introduces the intellectual hero of the book, an 18th-century English minister named Thomas Bayes. Bayes developed a simple but profound theorem for how to update our beliefs in the face of new evidence. It's called Bayes' theorem, and while the math can seem a little intimidating, the idea behind it is incredibly simple and intuitive. It basically says this: your new belief should depend on two things: your old belief, and how convincing the new evidence is. Let's use Silver's unforgettable example. Imagine you suspect your partner might be cheating on you. Your initial belief? Your prior, in Bayesian terms? is that there's a 4% chance, which is about the average for married couples. One day, you come home and find a strange pair of underwear in your dresser. That's the new evidence. Your gut reaction might be panic. It seems like smoking gun-proof. But a Bayesian thinker slows down. They ask 3 questions. First, what's the probability of finding the underwear if your partner is cheating? Let's say it's 50%. Maybe they'd be more careful, maybe not. Second, what's the probability of finding the underwear if your partner is not cheating? This is the innocent explanation. Maybe it was a prank, a mix-up at the laundry, a gag gift. It's unlikely, but not impossible. Let's say there's a 5% chance. Third, and most importantly, what was your belief before you found the evidence? Your prior was only 4%. When you run these numbers through Bayes' theorem, the new probability, your posterior belief, that your partner is cheating isn't 90% or 100%. It's 29%. It has gone up significantly, for sure. You should be concerned. But it's not a certainty. The reason is that your prior belief was very strong. You started out assuming your partner was faithful. It takes a lot of evidence to overturn a strong prior. This is the essence of thinking like a fox. It's a disciplined way to approach uncertainty. It forces you to acknowledge your starting assumptions and to weigh new evidence with a cool head. You start with what you believe, you get new information, and you update your belief. You become a little less wrong. Then you do it again, and again, and again. The goal isn't to be perfect on the first try. The goal is to get closer and closer to the truth over time. Silver shows this foxy, Bayesian thinking in action in surprising places. Take weather forecasting. We love to make fun of meteorologists, but Silver reveals they are one of the great unsung success stories of prediction. A modern 3-day hurricane forecast is as accurate as a 1-day forecast was just 25 years ago. That's an incredible improvement that has saved countless lives. How do they do it? They combine the raw power of supercomputers with the seasoned judgment of human forecasters. The computers run dozens of simulations, each with slightly different starting conditions, to account for the uncertainty inherent in the weather, a concept known as chaos theory. But then, human experts look at those computer outputs. They know the model's biases. They know that a computer might not understand the unique geography of a particular coastline or the way fog behaves in a certain valley. They add their judgment, their prior knowledge, to the raw data. They find the signal in the computer's noise. It's a perfect blend of man and machine, of data and wisdom. Contrast that with a field where prediction has been a spectacular failure: earthquake prediction. For decades, scientists have chased the holy grail of finding a reliable signal that precedes a big quake. They've looked at radon gas levels, strange animal behavior, and tiny foreshocks. But the data is incredibly noisy. For every time a swarm of small quakes is followed by a big one, like in L'Aquila, Italy, there are dozens of times when a similar swarm means nothing at all. The problem, Silver explains, is a statistical trap called overfitting. This is when we get so focused on explaining every little wiggle and bump in our past data that our model loses its ability to predict the future. We mistake the noise for a signal. In Japan, some seismologists had concluded that an earthquake larger than a magnitude 8.6 was impossible in the region where the Fukushima nuclear reactor was built. Their model fit the recent historical data perfectly. But that history was too short. They had overfit their model to a limited sample, and they missed the true, long-term risk. Then, in 2011, a magnitude 9.1 earthquake struck, creating a disaster they thought couldn't happen. Perhaps the most fascinating arena for prediction Silver explores is the world of games, which act as perfect laboratories for our skills. He tells the story of the legendary chess match between world champion Garry Kasparov and IBM's supercomputer, Deep Blue. Going into their 1997 rematch, Kasparov was confident. He believed his human creativity and strategic vision, his ability to see the big picture, would always triumph over the computer's brute force calculation. And in the first game, he was right. He made a clever sacrifice that tricked the computer, which couldn't understand the long-term strategic advantage Kasparov had gained. But then something strange happened. Late in that first game, in a hopelessly lost position, Deep Blue made a move that seemed utterly pointless, almost random. Kasparov was baffled. A computer doesn't make random mistakes. He obsessed over it, and came to a terrifying conclusion. The move wasn't a mistake at all. It must have been a sign of a deep, superior intelligence, a strategy so advanced that he couldn't even comprehend it. He was spooked. In the very next game, when Deep Blue made another strong, unconventional move, Kasparov became convinced he was being outthought by a godlike machine. He resigned the game in a position that other grandmasters later showed was actually a draw. His confidence was shattered, and he went on to lose the match. The ironic twist? Years later, one of Deep Blue's programmers revealed the truth. That strange, genius move in the first game? It was a bug. The computer had crashed and, unable to choose a move, had defaulted to a random one. Kasparov, the greatest chess mind of his generation, had projected a signal onto pure noise. He wasn't beaten by the machine, he was beaten by his own interpretation of it. His imagination, his greatest strength, became his downfall. The lesson is profound. Even the smartest among us are constantly telling ourselves stories to make sense of the world. We are pattern-finding machines. But sometimes, the patterns we find are just illusions. This brings us to the ultimate challenge in prediction, what former Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld famously called the unknown unknowns. These are the risks we don't even know we don't know. They are the gaps in our knowledge that we don't even realize exist. Both the attack on Pearl Harbor and the attacks of September 11th were failures of this kind. In both cases, all the signals were there. Before Pearl Harbor, American intelligence had broken the Japanese diplomatic code and knew that relations were deteriorating. They noticed that Japan's aircraft carriers had gone radio silent, disappearing from the map. But the American commanders had a theory, a hedgehog idea. The biggest threat was sabotage from Japanese Americans living in Hawaii. So, to protect the planes from sabotage, they lined them all up wingtip to wingtip on the airfield, making them a perfect target for an aerial attack. They were so focused on the threat they knew that they were blind to the one that was coming. It wasn't a failure of information. It was a failure of imagination. The same was true before 9/11. The intelligence community had picked up countless signals about al-Qaeda's intentions. But, Silver explains, they couldn't imagine a plot of that scale and audacity. The idea of terrorists using commercial airliners as missiles was deemed too unrealistic to even be included in a wargame simulation. It was an unknown unknown. So what can we do in the face of such profound uncertainty? We can't predict everything. Black swan events, by their very nature, are unpredictable. But Silver leaves us with a path forward. It's not about finding the perfect model or the magic algorithm. It's about changing our mindset. It's about embracing the way of the fox. It's about thinking probabilistically, always acknowledging the uncertainty in our beliefs. It's about being willing to update those beliefs when new evidence comes along. It's about knowing where we're coming from, understanding our own biases and priors. And most of all, it's about having the humility to know that we will often be wrong, but having the courage to try anyway, and to learn from our mistakes so that we can become less and less wrong over time. Commentary. As we step back and look at the landscape of the signal and the noise, what's the big takeaway? For me, it isn't just a book about data or forecasting. It's a book about humility. In an age that celebrates loud, confident voices and absolute certainty, Nate Silver makes a powerful case for the quiet strength of doubt. The most profound lesson is the distinction between hedgehogs and foxes. This is more than just a clever metaphor, it's a guide for navigating life. How many times have we seen people, in politics, in business, even in our own families, who were so attached to their one big idea that they refuse to see the world as it truly is? They become prisoners of their own certainty. The book is a powerful call to embrace our inner fox, to be curious, to be open-minded, and to understand that wisdom often lies not in having all the answers, but in asking the right questions. The idea of Bayes' theorem, too, is a game-changer once you let it sink in. It's a formal process for something we all should be doing instinctively, changing our minds. How often do we form an opinion and then spend all our energy defending it, searching only for evidence that confirms what we already believe? Bayesian thinking is the antidote to that. It's a recipe for intellectual honesty. It gives us permission to evolve, to admit that our past beliefs were incomplete, and to get closer to the truth, one step at a time. It's not about being right from the start, it's about getting less wrong with each new piece of information. What can you do with this today? Here are a couple of simple ways to start thinking like a fox. First, try thinking in probabilities instead of certainties. The next time you have a strong opinion about something, whether your favorite team will win, whether a stock will go up, whether you'll ace that test, don't just say it will happen or it won't. Try to put a number on it. I think there's a 70% chance they'll win. The act of assigning a number forces you to confront the true level of uncertainty. It forces you to be more honest with yourself. Second, actively seek out information that challenges your beliefs. If you're convinced about a certain political viewpoint, don't just consume media that agrees with you. Spend 10 minutes reading an intelligent argument from the other side. Ask yourself the most important Bayesian question: what evidence would it take to make me change my mind? If the answer is nothing, then you're not thinking like a scientist. You're thinking like a zealot. The world Nate Silver describes is complex and often unpredictable. But it's not hopeless. We have the tools to navigate it. The challenge is that the most powerful tool isn't a supercomputer or a fancy algorithm. It's a mindset. It's the discipline to distinguish what we know from what we think we know, and the wisdom to understand that the signal is the truth, but the noise is what makes us human. That was a deep dive into The Signal and the Noise by Nate Silver. We've covered some of the biggest ideas today, but I have to be honest with you, this summary is just the appetizer. The real meal is in the book itself. The magic happens when you're reading, and one of Silver's stories or a simple turn of phrase connects with you in a way you didn't see coming. This overview is here to help you decide if this journey is for you. If anything we talked about today sparked your curiosity, I truly encourage you to pick up a copy. Reading it isn't just about learning. It's an experience that can fundamentally change how you see the world and the choices you make every day. You can find a link to the book in the description below. Also, if you found this summary helpful and it gave you something to think about, please do me a small favor and hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. That way, you won't miss our next exploration into another life-changing book from the billionaire's bookshelf. Let's keep learning and growing together.